So thank you very much, all of you, for being on this panel. And I hope that so far the two speakers who have covered the different aspects about it. I think since we have already heard from Christine, so I'm just wondering whether I would like to be able to hear from either one of you, Yinghui or JN, from your perspective of what you just heard from what the two speakers have just covered, something that you want to add to, or something you want to disagree with, or something you say is absolutely not going to work. Please go ahead. So why don't we start from Yinghui? Yeah, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. So just a quick introduction of myself. So I'm from MasterCard. I'm the Regional APAC Director, and I look after the digital merchants, primarily looking after new flows and any kind of innovative new purchases. So that's my remit. In terms of the topic that we're discussing today, I think what I really liked about the topics covered before me is really around the mindset shift. And I just wanted to add one thing, that I think the mindset shift that we need to see is not just the mindset shift from the employees, but also the mindset shift from the management team. And this is absolutely critical because I think in a MasterCard, where there are many different cultures, where there's expectations from some teams around having face time with bosses, I think it's very critical that we remember and set the right expectations within the organization across all the regions and countries, that in this digital environment, it is less important. FaceTime is not important. What is most important is to find the most productive environment and tools to enable your teams to work across markets and across cultures. So that's something that I think we've done very actively, within MasterCard, just to make sure that expectation is very clear for both the management team as well as the employees, to ensure that the mindset is one that has safe space. It also allows time for actually individual employees and management to actually reflect and pause within the week itself. So that would be the only one I would like to add.
Thank you, Yinghui. Go ahead, Jian.
Hi, everyone. So just by way of introduction, I'm from Norton Rose Fulbright Ascendant, which is a former law alliance between Norton Rose Fulbright, an international firm, and Ascendant Legal. So we do a mix of international and local work. So I come from a very different environment, which is from a law firm, and I'm a litigator. So we tend to be known as the dinosaurs in this world, in the sense that we use very little technology. We're quite backwards in terms of how we operate. And I think in general, COVID has changed quite a lot of that. I see the firm putting in a lot of effort in terms of digitization, and in a few weeks, they managed to get, for instance, everyone to have access to proper electronic signature. In a few weeks, they managed to, I think, implement Zoom for everyone. So things have changed quite a bit. But I think there are a couple of points which was touched on earlier, and I would like to hear more thoughts, and I have my doubts and my questions. One of them is in terms of measurement and metrics, because I think during Jay's session, there was a lot of talks about metrics, and how we measure this, how we measure that. Law firms love measuring things in terms of time, especially because a lot of us still charge in terms of hourly rates. And sometimes I do wonder whether it's cost effective to measure a lot of these things, because you end up incurring a lot of costs, actually, and a lot of stress being placed on your employees to measure their time. So that's one thing, right? And the other thing is, I feel that in terms of so far working from home, one thing that people are lacking now I think was touched on briefly by Christine in terms of mentorship. So especially juniors, I think being one of the more junior members in the firm, one of the things that we still haven't quite figured out is how to help juniors continue growing in COVID era where everyone's working from home, because you don't get the kind of face time with your seniors. You don't get the kind of very spontaneous mentorship that you get in the office. And you don't get the kind of, I think, physical networking that happens. So those are some of my thoughts.
Thank you, Jian. Christine, you want to follow up on that, and anything to clarify or add on to it?
Yeah, I mean, I really, like those thoughts, honestly. And I also come from a consulting background. Prior to Red Hat, I was with Ernst & Young. So I understand the need to make sure that we are fully utilized, and the fact that we are being measured by our utilization and that we're not on the bench. I think one thing that Jay really highlighted, which I would agree with, and not that I would agree with measuring or monitoring the activities online, because I do think that the psychological safety of our associates or our people is very, very important. And I still want to go back to the point where we talked about really just ensuring we're measuring the results based on the deliverables, and not by the online activities. But I do get the understanding, and I get it that there are organizations that actually measure by utilization, and that's not something that I think we can overnight change it. But also the fact that we are charging customers by hours, it is again based on the deliverables, right? It's not measured by how much time you spend on this video call, for example, but it's measured by the output that you are delivering at the end of the day. So that is the one thing that I want to highlight on the psychological safety, which I would really encourage all employers and managers to focus on that, because at the end of the day, if your associates are not open, or if there's not enough trust to have open conversation with you in terms of needs, in terms of their challenges, because they are worried for whatever reason, or they do not feel safe, there isn't a space where they can speak freely, or they feel like they are being monitored in whichever way, the ultimate outcome is going to be that it is very likely that we will lose this group of key talents. And do we really want that? And what is the other kind of implications that will come along with losing such talents, right? Because of perhaps the culture that we are trying to build during this pandemic. So I just want to really highlight on that. And the part on the early talent, or the mentorship, I think it's very interesting, and Harish can probably attest to that, because in Red Hat, we are not traditionally a very structured organization. We really are quite a free-spirited organization where everyone is free to contribute. There isn't a fixed process in terms of things. But I realized that with this pandemic, it is very critical for us to implement some form of a structure and process, and to provide clarity. And this is something that I think we've done really well for early talents or new hires. We've really started to put into a structured program. For example, in Red Hat, we partner with IMDA to bring in early talents into the organization, fresh graduate from school. How do we then build their technical skill sets, and also enable them to embrace the culture within Red Hat, which is one of the very key element of the strength of Red Hat, right? Our core culture. So there is a very structured program in terms of how do we spend time with them? Who are the mentors assigned to them? Are they technical mentors, but also corporate mentors, also buddies, just so that they are able to gain connections that is not easily available in a virtual world. And making sure that we are actively connecting them to everyone within the organization.
Can I actually add to that? So I really agree what Christine said. So one thing that we have learned as an organization is that because of digital, we have ironically lost the ability to build culture. So that's something that has come up very strongly, and I totally agree, especially for new hires or people who have just joined the organization. Just not being in office, not seeing people interact in office actually does ironically actually potentially cause them to lose the sense of what the culture is. How do you fit in? So within Mastercard, what we've done is, of course, we've always had a structured program, but what we've actively done is how do we try to increase linkages that would have naturally occurred within the organization if you were in office, right? So toilet breaks or lunch breaks. So what we've done is that we've actually created like lunch chats and sessions across the different teams, just to make sure that is structured and put in place. We've also had to increase little food sessions, of course, in small groups outside of work, just to make sure that the new hires are not kind of deprived of the ability to understand and fit into the culture. So I think that has definitely come up as something that is of critical importance.
Thank you. So one of the things that I'm picking up from here is that, as what JN was saying, from a legal perspective, you are measured by how many hours you are clocking in. So sometimes the question I always ask people will be, if it goes back to the notion of if the only thing you have as a tool is a hammer, then everything is a nail. So if the only way you're going to measure anything is by hours, then that's the only thing they're going to do, and therefore people will find ways to fit into that, whether it makes sense or not. So my question then here is, given the opportunity that we have in front of us, totally trashing every single thing that we are aware of, is there a different way to do these things? Maybe measurement of hours to bill a client may be there, but you may reduce it significantly for something else. I don't know what that would be, but this is an opportunity to rethink, different ways of measurements, as it were, that make sense from across the board, because we are now necessarily not doing it the same way.
Yeah, so I think in terms of legal industry, that we have seen quite a bit of pressure from in-house counsel to provide flat sort of fees model, or some sort of tier by tier. So stage 1, roughly, this is how much we'll be charging, and then stage 2 and stage 3. And I think that's very much driven by in-house counsel in terms of managing their budget. So we do see that happening. And law firms, I think, especially in-house, especially international law firms, are starting to adapt to that. But it's not being seen across every single type of work. So we see that happening more often in corporate kind of work, whereas in litigation, a lot of it is still very much by hour, because litigation is very fluid. So some cases it can usually cost maybe only 10,000, but because of the unpredictable nature of how the other side responds and the things that are at stake, it can somehow, just for the same thing that usually costs 10,000, it might then become 100,000. So I think we do see people trying to look at how to measure value of what you are giving, and then translating value into fees instead of time as the key metric. But definitely time is still an important metric. So I would say, actually, from my perspective, the important thing is to find a way to allow people to track time more seamlessly. So personally, when I was in a smaller firm, I get to experiment with different ways of tracking time. And I think the benefits of certain time trackers, which are essentially automatic time trackers. It runs sort of at the background. And so if I open a file from a particular folder, it knows that I'm looking at that matter, and it sort of just automatically track it down for you. And automatically, you can create rules to let it automatically tag your time. But it is only one metric, and you don't have to say, look at it in a very religious manner like how we look at it now. And that allows you to look at it sort of maybe from a retrospective perspective. So maybe every quarter you look at how much you spend on particular matters, and then you can reconstruct things very easily if necessary. But it basically takes away the mental stress that you put in every single day to clock minimum 7.5 hours, right? So I think that's how I would look at it. So a mix of business models changing, calculating by value instead of by time, and then also allowing people to track time much more intuitively.
I think excellent. I think that's I would concur with that. Fortunately, in the business that we are in Red Hat, we don't have to worry about that. But I'm sure there will be others who are on the call on this tennis webinar who are challenged with the fact that their billing model, the way they price themselves in the marketplace, is by metrics that are hour-based, in-person based, and stuff like that. So I think it is a real challenge. Now, the question I will have is, from to all the panelists is, given the fact that we now have an opportunity to revisit a lot of these assumptions, is there an assumption that we always had that you now say, I don't want to do this anymore? I don't want to use this anymore. Is there anything at all? So an example I'll give is, the fact that, I have to be in the office to do anything. That's an assumption a lot of people had. oh, I don't want to bring my work home. Yes, I agree. So is there any assumption that you think is no longer valid and you really need to, you feel really strongly about it? Anyone? Maybe you need to think about it.
Yeah, I think for me, because so I cover the entire AP market, and before COVID, we had to travel maybe 4 or 5 times a month to basically get deals because we have all the in-market teams and we need the kind of the FaceTime. I think what I've learned from COVID is that we do not need to actually go to the markets on such a frequent basis to be able to get the kind of momentum and pipeline that we were hoping to get, which is an assumption that unfortunately me and the management team always had for the longest time. So we had, all I traveled last year was maybe a total of 2 times versus, more than 40, 50 times the year before. And we still have the same healthy pipeline as before. So I think COVID has taught us that, you can use many other ways to maintain the relationship, to build the trust with the customer. And of course, the level of, collaboration with your in-market teams as well. So I think that has definitely changed a lot for our team. So moving forward, I think for my team, it's really on a needs basis, right? If there is an absolutely critical reason why we have to be in market, we will go. But otherwise, I think the default has now changed to not going for every, just because, it helps everybody, whether it's family time, whether it's, just to be safe and whatever other reason. So I think that has been a big change for my team, especially because we're so regional focused. And as you can imagine, Singapore is a very small market for us.
I think the bigger challenge will be all the airlines are going to be having zero passengers, right? I mean, I just received from Singapore Airlines the Kris Flyer Gold or whatever.
Yeah.
And they just extended it for another 12 months to end of next year or something like that. It's like, okay, well, I only traveled once last year, and so thank you very much.
I think personal travel will happen just because humans love to explore, see wilderness and all of that. But I think business travel, people are rethinking whether there is an actual need to be in market to get the same deal done.
Exactly.
For me, I definitely agree with that with regards to the travel, right? Is it really now something that is absolutely necessary? I feel like also the virtual world has opened up, the real globalization. And with that, the connectivity is so much, beyond, a lot of imagination, right? I, heard from, Jimmy just now that, downloaded Zoom just almost immediately, in order to get used to the current virtual world. For me personally, one of the assumptions that I've thrown out of the window, is also the fact that in order to manage your employees or your region, you need to be in the same location. I think very often, we know that, from a regional perspective, we may be based in Singapore, which is the headquarters. We travel a little bit out, and we feel like, that may be able to help us, get to know our employee better, spend more time with them. But, just for my example, I've actually started my EMEA role since September. So for about 5 months, I have been working remotely. And for those who maybe was later joining the call just now, I only moved to Munich less than a week ago. In fact, on the 2nd of January, right? So since September, I've been managing in the European region remotely from Singapore. And it's absolutely possible. It's not like you need to physically be here. And the only reason that I'm here right now is because of the time zone difference, and that physically and from my personal well-being, minus COVID, of course, is better for me to be here in the right time zone with the people. But it was going perfectly okay, during the earlier stage. And, there was still connections. It really depends on how you make a very deliberate attempt in terms of making those connections, even though you are not not in the exact same location. So I really agree with Ying Hui as well in terms of what is it that we need to do now, maybe shifting, our mindset, our focus in terms of building those connections, bringing in the numbers, bringing in the deliverables without having the assumption that we always need to be in a physical location. The other assumption that very interestingly at the earlier stage when we were assessing the business critical needs to go back to the office, very often there is an assumption that operational role, such as sales operation or finance related role, needs to be in the office, particularly during sales quarter end closing. But we also very quickly realized that that is not the case. As long as you have strong connectivity at home, Wi-Fi connection is strong, there is no absolute need to say, oh, I need to sit there to be in the office so that when the sales put in the transaction, I am there to actually process it. I think that is also another piece of assumption that we have realized after really understanding, the true need of what business critical is by being in the office, right? It doesn't mean that, and I think also the definition of being business critical, very often we see business critical, and obviously there are many various definitions. You can see business critical as a senior leadership that needs to provide direction, but you can also see business critical as, some group of individuals that really need to be together in order to have access to a specific equipment that is in a specific location. And I think that is, again, the definition or assumptions that we have constantly challenged ourselves as an organization, not to have something that's fixed, but to review it on a agile and flexible basis, and to hear the voices of people and making sure that we are adjusting the way we work according to the changing environment, then applying something that's in the box and say, we need to look at things as specific or one way.
Yeah, so I echo the points that Christine mentioned and Yinghui as well. Definitely the first big question or the assumption is that goes out the window is that virtual is just a less ideal alternative to whatever that's physical, right? And I think, so to me, the first thing that we ask ourselves nowadays when we decide whether to do something, whether we have to do it physically, is whether I can do this virtually and what are the pros and cons. So I would actually say, while I very much agree that a lot of things can be done virtually, I say that a lot of what we are experiencing now is what I think is part of this COVID-19 exception, right? It's like in law, we have this thing called a moratorium where everything is just put to a pause. And I feel that we're in that state right now, where people are a bit more understanding, a bit more forgiving with the inconveniences that COVID brings to our life. So, for instance, for business travel, right? I fully agree that maybe last year we see at least for my firm, we see ourselves doing quite well. We still have great amount of international cross-border work, but I'm honestly not sure moving forward when everything returns to normal, whether that will maintain. Because if I'm the local partner and say I want to look for someone to collaborate or work with, or want to engage someone's services, I would probably go for someone who's willing to come down to my region to meet me physically and make that connection, than someone who is so comfortable in, say, based in Europe, never has to travel because they're so well known and so established. That hunger, that connection that you have is quite important. And I think also when we travel, for instance, when I went to Korea before COVID happened for business sort of conference, when you get to a zone, you understand the whole culture and you sort of switch yourself to a certain way, and you speak in a certain way, you act in a certain way, and you just end up building better rapport. Whereas now we just hop on a call and you speak to someone in Korea, and sometimes, especially if you're not familiar with the culture, you end up going completely different wavelengths. So I do think that that there are benefits for when it comes to physical interactions, so physical business travels, and even for us, physical hearings. So a lot of, obviously now we see, previously the courts are very insistent that every hearing should be physical, because we hold ourselves to different standards. I don't know what they want to say about it, but it's essentially we think of ourselves as a more honorable profession, and certain things require certain sort of decorum. But now we see that actually a lot of people enjoy doing what we call pre-trial conferences, which are essentially administrative hearings virtually, because most of it takes 5 minutes. Whereas in the past, what we would do is that we had to go to court, and the traveling time, the waiting time will be, say, 1.5 hours, and then you have 5 minutes hearing, which the cost is disproportionate to your clients, right? So that is something that the assumption has changed completely. I think one other assumption which some of my partners used to, I think we see that being debated quite a lot, was that people are less productive when working virtually. That was very interesting because I think within Norton Rose, we actually tracked our data for some of those people who worked virtually pre-COVID, right? And even before COVID, there was a lot of data that we can show that people are not less productive when they're working remotely. But then a lot of partners were insistent that you got to come back, mainly because they work better as partners when they have their sort of team around them. But then after COVID started, they have no choice. And then they realized, hey, actually, our hours actually went up quite significantly after everyone started working remotely. So that assumption just went out the window. So I think now people are more respectful of you when you just decide to say work from home and you come in when you need to. And that I think is a good development.
Yeah, I think that's great insights from all of you. Thank you very much. I think, I just want to, I'm looking at the Q&A section. I don't see anybody asking any questions yet. So please, participants, please post your questions there. We'll try and answer them as well. It's not just us blabbering around here. We want to hear from you, and then we want to try and see whether we can, have a conversation. It's all about conversations. So let me move to a slightly different topic. The question of what happens when when we say, okay, now that we have relooked a lot of the assumptions and now things are sort of getting back to normal, so to speak. Do you still want to jump back to that way of doing it? Because in all honesty, it's been a year for me since, well, almost a year that I stepped into the office, physically gone into the office. I haven't necessarily needed to wear a shirt. I've always been wearing t-shirts. So I find that, now I need to wear a shirt. So to me, it's almost a year's worth of not wearing a shirt, but a t-shirt. It changes how you look at different things. It's acceptable to me, it's fine. In fact, I will share one particular scenario that happened very early in this, and we had a conversation with a particular person who was with a large organization. And all I know whenever I had to meet with that person was that he will be in his office. He's got very prim and proper shirt, nicely starched up. I mean, looks starched up, and then with a jacket, and he sits there and somebody brings him a cup of coffee or tea. And then when we have the meeting, we get the coffee and tea. Great, all wonderful. And he doesn't say much. He does say some, but not much. And then after that, everything's over. An hour later, we leave and say, thank you, bye-bye, and so on. Now, when this thing happened, this individual was sitting in his kitchen with a t-shirt, and there were things behind him. I think there was some stuff happening at the back. And he was a completely different individual online than when I sat in front of him across the table. He was no longer stiff, no longer the prim and proper. And I got to see him as another human being. It's not like, oh, there's this guy I have to deal with. So I think those are the kind of things that we probably change how we interact with one another. And there is a human interaction, definitely guaranteed that's necessary. But I think these are some of the other things that we would never have seen at all. I'm not sure whether you have any of this kind of experience as well.
And I would just say that it's very interesting, and maybe connecting earlier to what Jian was saying with regards to people being more forgiving now, right? And I would say maybe it's more of people being more flexible, and I would say that there is no going back to the original normal anymore. No way, there's no way. I mean, earlier on when we were doing the earlier sessions as well, we can see from all the statistics, all the polls as well, that it's clear. Nobody wants to, be back. Majority of the people don't want to be back in the original normal anymore. A year ago, before COVID started, where we report to the office at 9 o'clock, and then, maybe work all the way, have 1 hour lunch break, and then, and work at 6 and be in the rush hour, squeezing with everybody in the MRT. I don't think.
What is that? I haven't squeezed in the MRT in a long time.
Exactly. And I just think that it's no longer possible for us to go back. I do see us returning back a little bit, but in a different way. Like travel would be different, you know, and I know that I'm one of the very lucky ones to be able to take a plane recently. I will tell you, travel is different. Okay, you know, it's no longer the even, and it's funny. I don't know if any one of you has spoken to anyone who had traveled. When I was on the plane, I was very much hoping to upgrade myself on business class, but I would say business class is completely full.
Wow.
And guess what? I walked through and I went to, you know, my cabin. There was only 4 of us in the entire cabin. The business class was full. If anybody was thinking that they can have bigger space, lesser human contact, safer, they are probably going to rethink if I want to book business class. Okay, so for all of you who are going back to travel, rethink, because I was really getting all the attention. You know, I have, because the number of air stewardess was exactly the same, right? And they were really giving, like, I had one-on-one attention. And there's nobody.
You have 4 seats on each side. You got 4 seats on each side.
Oh my God, I have so much seats. And basically there's nobody around in my entire cabin, right? Because there were multiple cabins. So, you know, the 4 of us in the non-business class cabin was spread out. So if you want safety, please, you know, I highly recommend you not to book yourself on business class. So things would change, you know, and the travel is not going to go back to normal. We are not going to go back to office. Harish, when I see you back in Singapore, Red Hat, I know both of us will not be in corporate wear anymore. And anyway, in Red Hat, we never usually wear corporate wear. We're pretty, you know, pretty casual that way. But I know we're going to be even more casual. But yes, you know, so we may return back to some form of a new norm, but it's going to be completely different. So for those of us who are thinking we may go back to, you know, 1 year ago, good luck, because we will not.
I totally agree with Christine. I don't think it is possible at all to return back to what it was 1 year ago. In fact, we did a global poll and an AP poll across MasterCard to like get people to talk about their choices and what they would prefer. And I think more than 90% of people said that they would like the choice of being able to return to office when they want to, when they need to, you know, it doesn't matter, right? So I think the difference now is that there's of course more forgiveness, more flexibility, but I think people are just allowing more personalization, right? So you go in an office when you want to, 1 time a week, 2 times a week, it doesn't really matter. As I said, what is most important is to actually think about what are the other things that you can do, right? To ensure that you can still build culture. What other things that you can do, to Jian's point, you can still have that kind of personal touch and trust with your clients, right? So beyond having to fly all the way down there to show them that you were hungry for their business, there are many other things you can do, right? So we've actually had a client, a very traditional issuer in the Philippines, tell me that, you know, through COVID, I've actually learned like how much MasterCard is supportive of me. And we had zero trouble. We didn't meet them once at all in person. It was a completely new leadership team, but there are many other ways that you can actually think about to show that kind of trust and the kind of relationship you want to build. So I personally don't think it will ever go back to normal. Myself personally, I very much appreciate the flexibility and you know the need, the ability to then choose whether or not that you actually have to have the business travel just because there's a deal in the market. So I really agree with Christine. It will not go back to normal. There's going to be a lot more personalization, more flexibility, and I hope this is going to be the case for all local companies as well. That they give customers as well as the employees the kind of flexibility and the choice to decide what works for them.
If you don't mind, I'd like to learn a bit more about, so how do you guys do it in terms of building that tie and so earning their trust? So some of the things that we thought about within our firm was about, for instance, sending food to, say, we have Malaysian clients. So we'll send food delivery to the office, and then we'll get food, and then we sort of all tune in together, and then all have like a, you know, if it's drinks and then food, and we all chat together. But it still feels a bit off. It's like you do it once, maybe it's kind of interesting, but you can't do it every time. So I'm kind of interested to hear other ideas.
Right. So what we do, we unfortunately don't really send food because, for example, if we send food to a bank in Philippines, for instance, you know, there are many times this year where they were not even allowed to be in office because of typhoon, because of COVID, for whatever reasons, right? So it will be wasted. So what we actually do is that we're a lot more proactive in crunching data, analyzing their data for them, providing trends and insights and our market perspective or our global perspective of what will likely happen in the next couple of months, and then giving them that kind of consultancy or advisory, try to tell them, okay, this is a crazy environment, your numbers are down, but based on our data, we see this trending up in these markets. This is what we can do. This is how we can help you. So basically using what we have, which is in our case data and the consultancy advice that we have and the view of the markets, to basically go beyond just being any partner, but being actually like an advisor to our partners. I think that made a lot of difference, and we actually made available a lot of tools that were previously chargeable, that were previously not even available to some of our partners, to them, and made available a lot of the time of our employees as well. And there was specific matrix introduced in the organization in 2020, which was around value add, right? How do you contribute? It may not result in actual sales targets, because anyway, sales targets are either within the organization, but also to your customers. I think that has been the biggest change for us. And we have been able to leverage our most valuable resource, which is data, to really build that kind of relationship and advisory, connection with our customers.
I think those are really good ideas. I imagine, actually, if you look at it from a different angle, these are the same things that you could have done even without COVID. You could have been more proactive and all these things. But because COVID allowed us to sort of experiment, the risk appetite sort of goes up a little bit. And it's the same thing I see in a lot of some even slightly more trivial things in our firm, for instance, talking about business where. So for the law firm, usually it used to be very strict about it. At least you have to be in your business attire for 4 days a week, minimal. And after COVID started, because everyone's just going in the office anytime that they want, and people recognize actually it's kind of pointless to all dress up because you're not really getting people to come in anyway. So we now have a completely flexible sort of business wear environment, and people, a lot of them just coming in t-shirts, and no one has actually complained or said anything. And so it's like I think if we can get any sort of silver lining from COVID, it's really at this moment, while we still have some time to think of what kind of experiments we want to make in our firm and to take the kind of risk that we otherwise won't take.
Yeah, and really because of the constraints we're facing, I think humans are really great animals, so we're able to then innovate outside of the boundaries that we had previously and really try to survive despite the constraints we have. And I think that's why all of these new tools, new ideas, new ways to connect is coming up. And I really appreciate that about COVID. So I'm grateful for COVID in a way.
It's kind of funny to hear I'm grateful for COVID, right? So it's I think that would be the best takeaway from here. But okay, I got some 3 questions in the Q&A section. So I think I'll take the last one that just came up from Xiao Fei. So he's asking, wonder if employees are protected under WSH when they are working remotely or working from home. I have no insight on that. Anybody in the panel who's got insight on that?
Yes, there is. I saw a couple of news articles about it. There is some kind of protection. I don't know the full details, but I'm quite sure it's there and it's being done by MOM.
Okay, yeah, nice. Indeed, that is the case also. I think it doesn't change the employer's responsibility whether you're working from home or you're working from the office. Basically, the act is applicable for injuries that's being caused as long as it is being it happened during work, right? So assuming your work activity had happened at home and for whatever reason, this particular activity had caused you to injure yourself, I do believe that it will still come under the act. And the way that we investigate into the same, the injury, whether it's caused by work or to ascertain whether it's caused by outside of work activity is very much the same. Similarly, right, say if you are at work and you went out for lunch and somehow you tripped on the road, so how does that, come into the act as well? It's a very similar kind of assessment process, so it doesn't really change the responsibility of an organization towards injury incurred during work.
Yeah, I agree. And if you have like very specific questions that you have in mind, you can let me know. we can take this offline because I think this is quite a sort of legal question. Yeah.
All right. Excellent. Thank you. There's another question from Aaron. It says, it's asking about, I'm not sure whether anybody in this panel can even answer it, but I'll ask it anyway. How do each of you see Singapore in 2 years? Will we be working from home or at a workplace? How can Singapore government help in preparing us in Singapore for the future after pandemic, in terms of how we can adapt to working from home using virtual tools, adapting and working workforce for global change, working conditions, and so on. I think the Singapore government part is going to be outside our scope. I don't think we can speak for the government, but I think each of you've said something related to what you like to see the normal to be as we move forward. So is there anything you want to add to it that you didn't say at the last time and can contribute here over the next 2 years? I guess I mean, the way I look at it is also from a perspective of by the time everybody has to be safe in order for everybody else to be safe. So which means everybody has to be vaccinated before we can do anything. So it has to be almost 100%, I feel. So until that happens, and by all reckoning, it's probably no earlier than end of 2021.
Yeah.
I think
in the Singapore context. Yeah.
Sorry.
No,
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I think one thing I'm not sure. So as Harish said, in terms of what Singapore government can do, I think a lot of it is really what we can do for ourselves and what our companies can do for us. But if that's something that we can look at from a more macro level, I think infrastructure is something that we can look at in terms of, say, digital infrastructure for how things are done. So it's quite encouraging to see, for instance, SingPass developing their own sort of the national-wide electronic signature, which allows for better sort of virtual operations. If you want to sign documents, you can do it virtually now, instead of having to actually do everything physically in the past. So Singapore, I guess the good thing about Singapore government is that it sort of enjoys quite a bit of trust from the public as compared to other countries. So it can sort of facilitate some of these activities. Although we do see, for instance, this Trace Together issue right now, which is bring some of these questions into the public arena. So it's something from a macro level, I see Singapore government being able to provide some of these infrastructure tools. Also in terms of internet, I think while we have one of the fastest internet, I think even it's funny that even with the fastest internet, we still have issues with our Zoom calls, and even in terms of just connectivity in general, it's sometimes still a bit spotty. So there are a lot of these things which can be improved, even though it might be marginal. So hopefully in future we'll have less of the can you hear me kind of situation. Everything should just work, right? And I think from that perspective, we need to improve a bit of the infrastructure.
Completely agree with that. And plus one to everything that Dion has said. I would say that, and also maybe tying back to the earlier presentation that Jay had, I would definitely see the roles evolving in every organization, new kind of roles being created in order to support the new way of working, more virtual support versus a lot of face-to-face support requirements. For example, a lot of maybe employee queries would be going to a virtual chatbot versus and relying on AI versus having somebody sitting in the office for you to go to the desk and ask a question. Right? In fact, I would say that we've already evolved a lot away from that even before the pandemic. But I definitely see a lot of new roles being created in terms of making sure that we are marketing ourselves as an organization effectively, maybe more emphasis in terms of, digital or virtual AI or even social media related functions versus the more traditional roles. And also then, again, really agree with what Jian has mentioned about what we can do for ourselves, right? How do we continue to upgrade ourselves and develop ourselves so that we are keeping up with the market and we are keeping up with the requirements that is expected, with the change of the world. This pandemic is not going to go over anytime soon, even with the vaccination. And like we all have been saying, we're not going to go back to the the so-called old norm a year ago. So what is it that we're going to do to prepare ourselves so that as the world continues to evolve, we are ready for the changes? So I'm sure the government will be doing a lot of things. I always have a lot of trust in our Singapore government. But then are the residents signing up for it? You know, are we actively finding out what's being done? Are we actually actively participating to make sure that we are keeping ourselves abreast in terms of the developments that's happening in the world?
I would like to add that, completely agree again with what Christine and Jane has said. So I think the environment is there, right? Whether it's internet or whatever the Singapore government has done for us is there. I think what is more critical is what you do for yourself, right? So what I've always encouraged our employees is just have the faith and have trust in your company and your managers that you are able to share what your preferences are, right? Your working from home preferences, what you want or do not want to do given the so-called situation. So I think what we owe ourselves is to, have a bit of faith, have a mindset shift, don't stick to the old normals and assumptions, discuss with your managers. And I think from the manager's point of view, it's really just to ensure that you give the best flexibility as possible while not impacting productivity and results to your employees. So I think that my main wish for Singapore and our companies is to really respect the individual's wishes, to have faith that you can be equally or even more productive at home, and to give people the choice, whether it's in the leadership team or even the employees. So that would be the hope that I have for the organizations.
I think thanks for that. There is an interesting about as well. There are people who run organizations and so on who are your teachers, right? They want to look over your shoulder to see what you're doing, right? They want to know, like I years ago, maybe 25 years ago, when emails were just beginning to happen. I remember I was in an organization where I forced everybody, we have to use email. So one of the guys who was the manager there, he said, why should I use email? I just have to go and call you and talk to you and then be done with it. Yeah. So when I forced him to get onto email, the challenge he faced was that I must respond to this now. And I want you to respond back to me now. It doesn't have to work that way. There are times you need to think through first. And so there was a lot of learning that had to happen when email was first introduced. So I think in that spirit, I think we are all learning a lot of the other things, like, should I have my camera on when I'm on a call? What does that mean? Because if I don't have a camera, am I being rude? So we need to have this, there was a set of rules, right, of habit or rules of etiquette.
Etiquette, yeah.
Etiquette, right? So should I have, what is my rules of etiquette for meetings? If it's with friends, do I go to a meeting room with my friends or go out with my friends in a restaurant or something like that? I put a paper bag on my head and say, no, you can't see me. We don't do that, right? We do actually see each other's face. So similarly, how do I translate that to this environment, in a virtual environment? Should I have my camera on all the time? Sometimes I don't want to, but even then, in a meeting, when you're sitting in a meeting room, you may zone out for a while, but you're still there. I can still see you zoning out. Now, I'm not going to hold it against you. I mean, I may not, others may, but I may not. But, so similarly here, you may be switching to another screen and I won't know at all, but that could be what you're doing. So I mean, there has to be some form of, I think we need to develop some of these things, and we need to articulate and maybe write it down and share it across and get as many people to contribute ideas there as well. I got one more question that came from Annie, which is kind of interesting, I must say. Given everything else that we have said in terms of remotely working and so on and so forth, does that change how people perceive organization by the address of where the organization is? I mean, you go by, you say, oh, prime address, have your corporate address with this one. Do I really care? So throwing open to the panelists, do you think that's even valid? Are these prime corporate addresses going to go the way of the dinosaur?
I don't know, it's very interesting. I have two very differing thoughts about this. First of all, I think as the economy evolve in the future, in fact, even now we are already seeing a lot of entrepreneurs, and obviously the address is not going to be I don't know, Shenton Way or something like that. And I feel like already the market is opening up to be very accepting towards entrepreneurial addresses, for example, Soho addresses. But the other side of it, on the flip side, and this is just me imagining, right? With the world again changing, I don't know how the real estate will look like in the future. And it could even be the case that now mailbox is going to be up for rental, because in the past where a huge office is, being utilized for hundreds or thousands of employees, being in the same location, I don't know if the world is going to evolve that way, that we may reconsider how we are utilizing real estate, right? How is the commercial developers going to be able to make money and continue to gain capital from the developments that they have? Are they going to start renting out mailbox? And how would you ever know that this person that you are actually partnering with is actually not based in Shenton Way, but based in block 123 Hougang Avenue 1? You never know that anymore. Physically, we're probably never going to be always in the office anyway. And I mean, this is a radical thought, but it's almost very possible.
I think people are already doing that in terms of renting poster boxes. There's the whole idea of PO boxes, and then also a lot of, say, co-working spaces. If you work there, you basically put your registered address there, and then all your mail goes there. And some of them are sort of located at very swanky offices. And then I think, yeah. So in that sense, I would think that I don't know whether people will respect you more if your location is a sort of prime address, because I think that was in the question. But I think location is always going to be a feature in almost all human society. One of the main things is convenience, right? Central business district is central because it's convenient. People can get to you very quickly. So I think there will still be a premium in central business district. But the way people structure their offices, I think there were discussions earlier about redesigning your office space. I think that will happen, and you might end up having smaller office spaces and all. I think we will start looking at basically the experience, right, of when someone enters your office, and it's how the whole user experience that matters. Is not that much about the location. It's really how when they come in, they get treated. The kind of, I don't know, some places are really fancy. They get you all kinds of drinks and they make you so comfortable. You feel like you're in some hotel, and then you got some scent that they use, and wow, it smells so good, and you want to just go back to the office again. So it's the kind of thing that I think you see people trying to do. I mean, it's already happening before COVID, and I expect it to continue sort of along this trend after COVID. If there is even, okay, I think we're all living in the after COVID world already. There's no, I think what Christine mentioned earlier, which I agree very much, is that the pandemic is going to be there, and it's not going to be sort of just 2 years and then everything is over. I think you'll see, I think we have to be prepared at least to see a world where we are often required to vaccinate ourselves again and again and again, because the diseases are spreading faster. And it's quite sort of a sort of negative way of looking at it, but I think it's within the realm of possibility, and we've got to be prepared for that.
Yeah, so I'll be quick. I think it's mostly covered by Christine and Gian already. I think real estate, it's long-term investment. There'll be a significant time lag, so I don't expect any changes. There will always be a premium because of convenience, because of locality, because of clustering with people or industries which are similar will always be there. But I completely agree. The main difference is that capacity utilization is going to be drastically lower. So like for Mastercard, for instance, we have dropped from 90% to close to 10% only. So I think future investments would taking much more of a decentralized structure, maybe having multiple offices instead of having one centralized office, having one centralized office with multiple breakout areas, to allow for brainstorming and people to come together quickly. I think that will be the main changes. And of course, the environment and how you set up and design the office will also change.
I think there was a comment on the chat by Gordon saying that being more corporately and environmentally responsible is probably going to be the new lens that you look at the premium address. So yeah, why not, right? the ESG stuff that that I think Jay was mentioning as well. So I think we are coming to the close of our panel discussion. Is there any final thoughts before we wrap it up? We'll start from Christine, so that you can get on with yours life off after that.
Yeah, my start of my day.
Yeah, start of your day.
Yes, exactly. But no, thank you. I really enjoyed the session today. The presentation, also this panel discussion. I definitely appreciate all the views that's being shared. In fact, I am so happy that it seems we are also aligned in terms of our vision of the future, and hopefully whatever that's being shared today is able to inspire the audience, but also I'm really looking forward to future interactions because I'm so sure that we are able to learn more from each other as well. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Christine.
Okay, I'll go next. So again, completely echo Christine's thoughts. Really enjoyed the discussion and the questions and the interesting kind of perspectives shared by everyone. But I just wanted to say that I think the way forward is it's going to be a good change for all of us. I can only see positive energy. In fact, when we polled our colleagues and our teams, people feel that the greater flexibility, personalization of working environments is something that is only a plus. So in that sense, I feel like I'm very positive about the future. And definitely looking forward to more interactions with SES and all the other panelists as well. I'm really hoping to see a better kind of environment for all employees and managers, and one that will be a bit more flexible and forgiving moving forward.
So I'll just wrap this up by sort of going back to the question, which is, are we there yet? I would sort of change the question to just look at here, right? Where are we now? And I think I'm very grateful to be part of today's session because I learned quite a few interesting ideas, like what Christine mentioned in terms of outdoor calls, which I really want to try now, and recharge day, which I think is something that lawyers really need because we are always connected. So things like that, I fully agree. We need to share these ideas. I only hope that I heard of these things earlier on, because last year was quite a crazy year, and it was at some part of the year it was quite mentally draining. So I think we got to share these ideas, and we got to figure out how to make what we have now better. I don't really know where there is, but basically it's just to make what we have now and where we are now better. And I look forward to also working with SES and everyone more. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, LinkedIn, everywhere.
Thank you, panelists. I think let me just throw something in here as an idea, as a suggestion. This is something that we do in Red Hat as well, at least within my team. When we have meetings, we block out 1 hour in the calendar. Okay, that's the first thing. But that 1 hour, it doesn't mean 60 minutes. The meeting is only 30 minutes. So only the first half of the 1 hour is the actual meeting. The second half of that 1 hour is for you to do whatever, dots and crosses and whatever else that you need to do to wrap up the meeting, as it were, minutes, whatever you need to do. So you give you 30 minutes before the next one starts. So, and on top of that, every meeting must have an agenda. If you don't have an agenda, the meeting does not happen. I mean, I have been very strict about it with my colleagues. With Christine, she's okay. The other people say, no, if you don't have an agenda, I'm not accepting it. End of story. So what's the agenda? I don't mind meeting you. So that's why I have I created this thing called office hours. So that that's a no agenda session, but that's only for half an hour. So in that half an hour, please just drop by. Let's have a chat. We could solve world hunger by the end of 30 minutes or not, and it doesn't matter. But the fact is we have that connection. So my suggestion to you, think about organizing your meetings as 1 hour blocks, but only 30 minutes of anything that is substantial. The second 30 minutes is to do whatever, and then take a break and do whatever you want, and then go to the next one, so that there is some gap, some buffer. So with that, I think we will have to wrap it up. And so thank you very much, panelists. It's been a delight, and it's a lot of fun. So Christine, Ying Hui, and GN, thank you very much.